Good morning. Good morning. And welcome. I'm Reverend Amanda Weatherspoon, the minister of this congregation. Challenged by our liberating faith, we discover deeper spiritual meaning, nurture loving community, cultivate courageous connections, and partner in the work of justice. Welcome to you all at the end of a week that has felt like 3 weeks in one, or the beginning of a week where we don't know what's coming, where it feels like all hell is breaking loose, and maybe it is. But as the spiritual teacher Ram Dass reminds us, whether this is the beginning of the apocalypse or the golden age, the work remains the same: to love each other and ease as much suffering as possible. So welcome. Welcome to this place where you are loved. Welcome to this place where we affirm one another's multitude of personalities, where we are more than the labels that other people give us, where we are more than any one identity that we are told we are. This place where we affirm many genders and faiths and identities and backgrounds. Please know that in a climate of rising violent rhetoric, this is a safe space, this is a brave space, and you are welcome here. You who are trans or non-binary, two-spirited, or who are finding your authentic place on the full spectrum of gender, you are welcome here. You who are undocumented, bilingual, or finding your place in a new or familiar home, you are welcome here. You who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, you are welcome here. This is a place where we celebrate and lift up what makes us different, and where we embrace what brings us together in common purpose. A place where we protect one another, and a place where we will have your back if need be. Welcome this morning. If you are new or feeling new, please reach out to Kelly Green. Her picture will be on the screen. She is our Director of Member Relations. She knows everyone and she knows everything, and she will get you connected. Please reach out. We have large print orders of service, an elevator, a hearing loop downstairs, fidgets, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself during this time of worship. Please do it this morning. Whether this is your first time or you've been haunting this place for decades, it's not only a joy to be together, but it is important that we gather as people of faith and conscience, something that feels a little lacking these days, if you know what I mean. And we're not going anywhere. So let us gather together this morning and lead with love. Choir, you're up.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other foot and three without the other. One foot in front of the other foot and lead with love. I know you're scared. I know that you're scared. I'm scared too. And I'm scared too. But here I am. But here I am. Next to you. Right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other foot and lead without the other. One foot in front of the other foot and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other foot and lead without the other. One foot in front of the other foot and lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love.
Just a few announcements for you this morning. As always, be sure to check Current for a weekly list of events and ways to connect. Today, after the service, you're invited to join Green Faith for a discussion with local organizers Tina Scholl and Ebony Lockett, all about the many intersections of climate justice and how we can combat the impacts right here and right now. There'll be activities and ways to engage for people of all ages. All are welcome. That'll be downstairs in the Bernstein Room at 11:30. You're going to be hearing a whole lot about the upcoming UU Climate Justice Revival, and it is because we are excited. The planning team is hard at work, and through collaboration with Unitarian Universalists across the country, this is more than your ordinary climate justice lecture. This is more than an urging to drive electric or buy solar panels. This is an opportunity to engage our minds and our hearts for the long haul. We'll have food, activities for all ages, childcare, local community organizers, and fellowship with one another. The registration link is active. There are flyers all around the building with the QR code on it for scanning, or you can go to the website to get more information and to sign up. Come for an hour, come for the whole time, stop by for a connection and leave inspired. Now, we set a goal of getting 100 people to come to this. It's a lofty goal these days with so many things competing for our attention. But we believe in the power of this community to build together and to show up. Speaking of which, remember Charlotte for Choice, our community partner and recipient of our Share the Plate program in December. Well, the numbers are in. And together we raised over $5,780, more than surpassing our goal. I was able to spend some time at one of the clinics that they work with, and I saw firsthand not only where our support will be going, but the dire need there is to protect reproductive justice right here in Charlotte. I saw with my own eyes the antis, the protesters standing outside, harassing people, harassing women, harassing patients. I saw the supplies that they put together to give to families, to give to children who are waiting with their parents while their parents are receiving services. There'll be so many more ways and opportunities to partner in this work and to learn more about the landscape of reproductive justice in Charlotte and beyond, so stay tuned for more ways to connect. And this morning, we welcome Greg Jarrell of Charlotte Redress Movement. Let's give him a nice welcome. As we close out this monthly theme of discovery, how fitting it is to explore, uncover, and discover the stories of our wider community, the told and the untold, the seen and the unseen. And next week on February 2nd, after the service, you'll have an opportunity to join Greg as he does a tour of Charlotte. I forgot to write this announcement down, so I'm going off of memory right now. But you can find it in Currents, and you can sign up. This is a wonderful opportunity to move throughout uptown Charlotte and learn a bit about our history through experiencing it. If you have questions, please talk to Greg during coffee hour to get more information and to sign up. So, we light our chalice this morning with gratitude for the time in which we gather, the presence of mind and the openness of heart that draws us together to gather our spirits together once again. So in that spirit, you're invited to rise in body or spirit, to turn and greet one another. Remember the Hopi elder? The one from our first service together this year, the Hopi elder who told us that the river was flowing very fast. The elder speaks. You have been telling the people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour, and there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth, create your community, be good to each other, and do not look outside of yourself for the leader. Beloveds, the challenging news this morning is that time is up. We are out of time. This 20th century idea of the progress of time, the linear progress and achievement that is accessible and inevitable, that with enough work and the right ideas and the right people in place, that things will surely get better and better and better. Well, it ain't looking so good these days. And while I would love nothing more than to stand here before you and share a message that everything will be okay, that while things are upside down right now, that things will sort themselves out in the end, I can't tell you that. But I can share the good news, that time might be up, but that just means that the time is now. We've spent a lot of time focused on each other. Our faults, our disagreements, what we did or didn't like about each other's opinions or points of view. We spent a lot of time avoiding real conflict by hiding in the safety of what my former boss would call fake fights. We've spent a lot of time trying to convince one another of our position, our take on things, our side, our righteousness. And while we were busy scrutinizing each other, the real threat was growing right before our eyes, in plain sight. In fact, it was always there. Now, I'm being intentionally vague here because we could be any number of groups of people. We as progressives, we as Unitarian Universalists, we as people of liberal religion and values, we as a part of this congregation. And we are out of time. But that just means that the time is now. You might notice a renewed emphasis on community. The presence of community organizers at our events and in our services, more opportunities to connect with the work that is happening locally, more ways to engage and learn and weave and build partnerships. Friends, this is intentional. Not so that we can give ourselves the title of a social justice church, and not even because our values and principles call us to do so, which they do, but because as a house of worship, and hear me, as a house of worship, it is the rent we pay. Because it is the most ancient purpose of a congregation to serve the community that holds it, to serve the people who are in it. And because serving the community is a staple in societies, small and large, ancient and modern, we don't have to reinvent the wheel and come up with something brand new that's all ours. We don't have to all do the same things or think the exact same way. We don't have to hold the same belief or theory or reasoning. We are UUs after all. We can be imperfect. We get to be flawed. We get to have bad ideas and mishaps and disagreements. And when we don't get it right, when we mess up, or we say the wrong thing, or we miss the mark, or we disappoint each other, we have this space right here to come back to and to work on it and to move forward together. If we need to argue or solve conflicts or do some healing work with each other, we have our own time in which to do that. That is the beauty of a faith community. When we need to be lifted up, we have each other. When we need to sing or receive a blessing or light a candle, when we need to be taken care of, this place waits for us. We do that for each other. But we owe our community our presence and our service. We owe it to the people that we share a home with to show up and listen and learn and serve. And we can't cultivate courageous connections if we aren't connected to anything. Now, if you're just itching to send me an email, proving all the things that you already do, please hold on to that thought. We will need that. For the next while, we'll be diving into all the ways that we can authentically show up with our own unique gifts and skills and interests. We'll all be exploring together the ways that we can go from a congregation of individuals doing things to a community of people faithfully showing up together to make whatever kind of a difference we can, and to show that there is a place for progressive faith in this community right here, right now. And we will need your insights and we will need your ideas. So for this morning, we start with the most fundamental building block of a community: history. A living history that whispers through time and winds its way into the present. As we delve into what community care is and what community service is, we start right here, where we live. Who's here and who isn't? The stories that are told and the stories that are still being written and the stories that are forgotten. Like the elder says, the time for the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we've been waiting for. Friends, the good news is we were made for these times, and the time is now. Blessed be.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to Reverend Amanda, to Paula, and to Kelly, and to the staff here who have offered me this opportunity. My name is Greg Jarrell. I have held a number of roles in Charlotte, including working with Amy Brooks at Rain a few years back, and it's good to see Amy this morning. I now work as the organizer for the Redress Movement, working on building a broad-based coalition for housing justice. I've got a little bit of information over for the coffee hour and thrilled to talk to you about it. I also hope that a few of you will join us on our walk next Sunday afternoon. I call it Charlotte's Haunted Future. We're going to look for stories of exclusions and invisibilities that have been built into our cityscape next Sunday afternoon. So come and join us if you can. I thank you again for having me here. My work has been lately as a historian as well, not just an organizer, but as a theologian and historian, writing and researching about urban renewal. Urban renewal in the United States, the federal policies that changed the face of American cities from 1949 to 1974. More than 1,200 municipalities destroyed, more than 568 square miles of American built environment. That is the island of Manhattan 25 times over. That is half the size of the state of Rhode Island. 500,000 families displaced in the process. All of them poor, politically powerless, most of them black or other people of color. So that's the work that I've been doing, especially digging it up around Charlotte. And so I've got a few stories for you this morning about some of our local history and what I think it might mean for this moment, since the time is now, as Reverend Amanda has offered so beautifully. Since this is the time, what might we do with these histories? As we were talking about this morning, one of Reverend Amanda's questions to me was to dig in a little bit to help her understand, and maybe for all of us to understand, into the energy that animates our city. What is it that makes Charlotte the particular place that it is? And if you've been around for any time at all, you know that there's a phrase that pops up, the Charlotte Way is this sort of collective ideology. You might call it a collective delusion that has been held amongst folks here within the city. And so I wanted to just step off at the risk of using that cliche for just a moment to help us get into the story for this morning. The Charlotte Way was a phrase that started coming about, I believe, in kind of the mid-'80s as an evidence of the can-do attitude of the cities. It was brought by some civic cheerleaders, you might say, a group of executives, a group of Chamber of Commerce types, a group of elected leaders that determined that we would work together across the city in particular ways to accomplish the building of a great skyline or the restoration of particular areas. It involved cross-sector elite leadership. That was the way. And public-private partnerships, those kind of favorite neoliberal solutions that never accomplish what they aim supposedly to set out to do. And the rule of the Charlotte Way was that we were going to keep it cool. They would refer back to the Civil Rights Movement, where the violence that was seen, the police violence that was seen in places like Birmingham or Montgomery didn't happen here in the same way, which is not to say that segregation was not violently enforced, but rather that Charlotte leaders figured out how to offer the right sorts of pacifications that might keep us off of the news with the worst outbreaks of violence that were seen in other places. So you hear already my disdain for the Charlotte Way. It is patronizing liberalism. It is treating poor and oppressed communities as infants. It is genteel brutality of the sort where they would welcome you into their, where the elite would welcome you into their places for lunch at their country clubs, but would never consider the faulty foundations that the notion of a country club was built upon from the beginning. It was a history-free way of creating what the business leaders would tell you was a win-win. Right? So when they have a win-win, what they mean is we're going to pretend that we haven't already won everything in the past, and we're going to start fresh at this moment. Right? But we're going to start fresh without giving up any of the accumulated advantage from the past. So you got to give up some, even though you haven't won. Right? That's what they mean by the Charlotte Way. The Charlotte way has to be very, very marketable. Right? We have to be able to tell a pretty story, a story that sounds attractive, a story that keeps us from getting too upset over anything. It is, in my estimation, the inversion of our state's motto. In Latin, the motto of the state of North Carolina is esse quam videri, to be rather than to seem. In Charlotte, our motto seems to me to be a little more like to seem rather than to be. You all laugh, you know I'm telling the truth, right? We've got facades built all across the city aimed at hiding the injustices that we have built upon. There's a story of a formerly enslaved woman named Margaret Garner. In 1856, she fled the enslavement camp with her children, where she lived in Kentucky, crossed across the Ohio River into the area of Cincinnati, Ohio. Not too long after, empowered by the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, some men showed up at her door to arrest her, to take her back and to receive a bounty for her and for her children. Learning that their visit was nigh, Margaret Garner did a thing that sounds at once unthinkable and, at the same time, 100% sensible. She killed her youngest child, saying what I've heard black women in my neighborhood say to their children occasionally: I will kill you myself before I will let them harm you. Margaret Garner's story survived in just a little newspaper clipping. And it became the basis for the greatest American novel, Toni Morrison's Beloved. That is the story that she began with and said, when the archives don't tell the truth, when the archives don't tell the fullness thereof, we will have to dig deep into our imaginations to understand what has happened in our world, to understand what is happening inside us and our communities in a way that those who have been keeping our histories could never acknowledge or imagine. What follows in the course of Beloved, many of you have probably read it, some of you have probably seen the movie adaptation of it, is what happens in Beloved is that Sethi, who is the mother portrayed in this novel, and Denver, her daughter, receive a guest. And the guest comes mysteriously, and over the course of the novel, the action really rubs on trying to figure out who this guest is. And there are two options. The guest is either a revenant, a returning child. It is the child who the mother killed. And if it is this child, then how do you show hospitality is one of the questions that drives the book. How do you heal this unhealable wound that the unthinkable had been done, but also that the unthinkable seemed necessary? How do you heal such a wound is one of the questions driving this narrative. But at the same time, it's unclear who this new guest is. And so the other question driving the novel at the same time is who this stranger is. And why, if she is a stranger, if she is merely someone in need of hospitality, is the family there not able to simply treat her as though she were her own person? Why write someone else's story onto her? How might Sethi and her family heal the trauma in their house so that they can receive this guest properly? At the end of the novel, there's a coda, you might say, just a very short chapter, and it contains a refrain kind of interspersed. The refrain is, "This is not a story to pass on." This is not a story to pass on. Toni Morrison seems to mean at least a couple of things by that. For one, not a story to pass on, not a story to transmit, not a story to continue repeating in the sense of history repeating itself. But also, this is not a story to pass on, as in not one to ignore, not one to pretend didn't happen, not one to build facades around. A few stories not to pass on. In November of 1960, a white man named Vernon Sawyer showed up at the door of Friendship Baptist Church, the most prominent black church here in Charlotte, located in the former Brooklyn neighborhood. Now the site, Friendship stood where the NASCAR Hall of Fame now stands. Vernon Sawyer showed up in his official capacity as the executive director of the Charlotte Redevelopment Commission. That is the appointed commission charged with carrying out Charlotte's urban renewal plans. And the first neighborhood that the Redevelopment Commission was coming for was the Brooklyn neighborhood, home to more than 1,000 black families, to more than 200 black businesses, to more than a dozen black churches, to 2 schools, to numerous other social and professional organizations. Probably the most important site, certainly the most important site of black culture and thriving inside Mecklenburg County, perhaps one of those in the state. Vernon Sawyer showed up there in November of 1960 unannounced. He brought with him a Charlotte Observer photographer and a journalist. And he walked in, spoke to the pastor there named Coleman Carey, and commandeered the pulpit. Said, "Pastor Carey, this morning during the service, I'm going to need to speak to your congregation." This is not a thing. Would you allow for that?
Absolutely not.
Okay. This is not a thing that one does. Vernon Sawyer walked in. He stepped up to the pulpit. It was Communion Sunday, the celebration in Christian churches of our unity across the world. He walked up to the pulpit and he said to the people of Friendship, "The hour is getting late for you to determine where you will be moving your church." They did not know that they were going to be moving their church until that very moment. What had been actively, the narrative that had been actively brought to the community was that all the homes in the Brooklyn area would be torn down. Not that all the structures across 240 acres would be wiped clean. So at Friendship, they learned that morning, the hour is getting late for you to determine where you will be moving your church. Not one to miss the opportunity for an impromptu sermon, Sawyer then said, "I want to remind you that somewhere in the vast expanse of time, it is you who have been chosen to help lead our city at this crucial hour." Abject cruelty. Not only in its immediate implications, but in the way that it seized onto an ancient story and turned it against the people sitting inside that room. The descendants of enslaved people sitting at Friendship Baptist their ancestors had heard inside the story of chosenness, that is the story of the formerly enslaved Israelites, set free from Pharaoh out of the house of bondage. They had heard in that story freedom, even though it was their oppressors who had taught them that story. And now this white man shows up, takes over their building, and says, "We're coming to tear this down." This is not a story to pass on. There's a famous photograph from Urban Renewal in Charlotte. Many of you have seen it, I'm sure. It's been in the newspaper, it's been across museums. It's simply a picture of a man wearing a suit, driving a bulldozer. And he's the only one in the picture. It's a man. He's just wearing a suit. He's riding a bulldozer. You can see that on the front cover of my book, which is I've got a copy in the coffee area there, if you want to take a look at it. He's commonly thought to be Stan Brookshire. His name is actually Raymond King. Raymond King was one of the best-known Democrats in the state of North Carolina, the leader of the North Carolina Democratic Party, a man of enough political significance within this state that when the Kennedy White House in 1963 was beginning discussions on the legislation that would become the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Ray King was in the room. This is what you would call a white civil rights leader in the mid-1960s. And yet, the way that he has been most clearly memorialized inside our city is driving a bulldozer, wearing a suit during Charlotte's Greenville Urban Renewal project. Not a story to pass on. Not a story to transmit. Not a story to continue repeating. But also, the stories of urban renewal, the stories of white, particularly Christian leadership inside the city of Charlotte, looking at black communities and saying, we know what to do with your space better than you do. So we're coming with our power to take it. A giant land grab. Not a story to ignore either. And yet, that is what's happened. It's what's happened broadly until relatively recently. Many white residents, in particular around Charlotte, haven't known about the Brooklyn neighborhood. In particular, those who should have known best. And inside my scopes have been the congregation First Baptist Church. Downtown, we'll end our tour there when we go next week, sitting directly next to our Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, a perfect picture of the ideology of urban renewal, the fusion of political and theological power, remaking an entire city and built into the cityscape. While interviewing people there, I was told at one point, there was a question asked to an older member of the congregation who had been through their entire move from our main street on Tryon Street over into the Brooklyn neighborhood to this land grab that took place, the way that it all played down in the church. And she was asked, what do you remember them saying, the leadership saying, about the Brooklyn neighborhood? Her response, what is Brooklyn? Not, they didn't say anything, but instead, I'm not familiar with this concept. The very notion of this place has been erased altogether. In that way, the story had not been passed on, right? It had been passed on, rather. It had just been forgotten. It had been left out. But these stories need to be dug up. They're filled with life. They're filled with fascinating characters. And they're implications of our ongoing patronizing liberalism that continues to make it more difficult for black communities to stay stable than for any other communities around our area. And then, not a story to pass on, to pass like a mountain pass, right? A way of getting from place to place. Renewal was a way of getting from one manner of oppression to another, from one manner of neglect to another, but without taking responsibility for what was happening or for the results that were being born because of it. So, not a story to pass on. Here's what I want to say about this current moment, though. The powers that be, whether they be Donald Trump and his band of deplorables in the current administration, right? All of those who have continued to enable him, including the feckless Democrats who aren't able to mount any sort of meaningful opposition. They want us to think that there is no alternative, that the power of that bulldozer cannot be overcome, that it cannot be stopped, that there is no other vision that is worth pursuing. And so to that end, we've been subjected all week to this campaign of shock and awe, designed to wear us down, to make us terrified, designed to scare us, designed to make us think that we cannot overcome this power ourselves. But to that, there are older visions than this fascist vision that is visiting our country at this moment. One older vision that I would appeal to you comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, from the Hebrew prophet Zechariah, who lived himself in a time of severe political repression, who lived in a time where those who should have been his allies had not stood up and provided the resistance that they could have, where land was being taken, where territory was being expanded, where people were being brought to death in the streets, where their rights were being taken away. During this time of exile in Jerusalem, Jeremiah spoke a new vision to his people. The vision sounded like this: Jerusalem, he says, shall be called a faithful city. Old men and women shall again sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each with a staff in their hand because of their great age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets. Even though it seems impossible now, Zechariah says, should it be impossible to God? Even though it seems impossible now, is it? That vision of old men and old women sitting in the streets of a redeemed city, of children playing safely in the streets of a redeemed city, was expansive for that people. Our vision, too, can be expansive, of a city that can have space for all of us, of a city that has space not just for country clubs, not at all for country clubs perhaps, a city that has space for the poor, a city that has space for black neighborhoods to thrive and to have some sense of self-determination, a city that has space for trans and gender expansive persons to have room to thrive and to flourish in however they need to. A city that has space for the homeless now to have a home. A city that has space for all of our young people to learn to read and to write and to do math together, to learn to love one another, to learn to live together in peace, in schools that look like our community, rather than in schools that look like our segregation. A vision of a city that can be redeemed, that can create something else, that can refuse the vision given to us this week, the overwhelming vision of selfishness, destruction, of violence, and instead, a city of inclusion, a city of love, a city of peace, a city of belonging. May it be so.
me get where I need to go here real quick for our offering. Generosity. It's at the core of our mission and vision, and it is through generosity that we live our values out loud. What we give allows us to sustain the work of this congregation within and also beyond these four walls. When we gather each week, let it be with this very spirit of generosity and gratitude as we carry this work forward together. There are so many ways to give to our shared offering. You can text 73256, or you can give directly online. You can scan the QR code that's right up here, or you can give as the basket comes your way. Here, we don't give until it hurts, but in a way that feels right. While the offering is collected, you're invited to come forward and light a candle, honoring a milestone, a concern, a joy, or a celebration. The ushers may now come forward to receive the offering. When we come into this place each week, we come with a whole host of joys and concerns on our hearts. We don't arrive to this place as perfect people, and we don't leave here as such. Before this time, we make space for one another to hold that which is sacred and important, big and small. This morning, our hearts are with Evan Visco as he recovers from a hospitalization this week. We'll share more news as he continues to recover from reaching out. This week's news cycle has been exhausting and constant. And while it's tempting for me to turn away, we know that the rhetoric being shared and the orders being signed have real consequences for real people. All over the country, ordinary folks like you and I are preparing themselves to defend their neighbors, to rise up against hate, and to resist state-sanctioned violence in their communities. May we all face forward and move boldly in the direction of love. May we all be one another's keepers. May we each find our way towards courageous connection, finding our focus and staying the course, because we are in this for the long haul, and we aren't going anywhere. Won't you please join me in a moment of silence for all the joys and concerns of our hearts. Won't you join me in a time of contemplation and stillness, of meditation and of prayer? Lowering your gaze or closing your eyes, rooting yourself and connecting to where you are in this moment, how you are in this moment. Spirit of life, Spirit of love. Here we are gathered once more. Another prayer of hope, another prayer of longing, another week of uncertainty and disappointment. Our hearts are so full with the weight of everything in the world and the things in our own lives. So we offer prayers of presence, prayers of renewed hope, renewed strength, and prayers of gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to gather our hearts, the opportunity to come together, to be with one another, to rise for one another, the opportunity to be a part of a faith community. Spirit of life. What an honor and a joy it is to be able to gather with one another, to practice and live our values into this world, and living our values in this world has never been more important. Oh, the time is now. But we were made for these times. May we hold that sacred knowing in our hearts. May we build one another up with compassion and love and strength and courage. May we be good to one another. Give us the strength, not of a day or a week or a month, but the strength of years. That's what's ahead of us. I believe in my deepest heart that we've got this. But we don't know who or what we will lose along the way. So make us steady. Let us be focused, and let us connect even stronger together in this day and all of the ones to come. May it be so. Blessed be. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, Siyahamba. Our benediction this morning is in the form of gratitude. Gratitude for Greg Jarrell for coming and sharing. Organizer, historian, theologian, please connect with him after the service. Gratitude for the choir, for our musicians this morning. Of course, Scott on the piano, John always leading us. And gratitude for each of you, for the ways that you show up and build this place together. Whatever may come, it is in our hands, and we are fortunate to be able to come together. We will live in the light of love, despite and in spite of everything going on. A lot of you in this space worked hard your whole lives to gain rights for so many of us, and we will not let go of that. We will show up. We will claim our place. We're not going back, and if we do go down, we're not going down without a fight. So join me in our closing words as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. You may be seated.